Hereby call the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting of Monday, November 6th for the City of Westminster to order. At this time, we'll take a silent moment of personal reflection. A reminder to all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Westminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. I'll remind everyone that this meeting is for discussion and information gathering only. All decisions will occur during council meetings. We thank all of our presenters for their time. Moving on to the agenda for the committee meeting, looking for direction from the committee regarding the agenda. Councilor Thompson.
I recommend that the agenda dated November 6th, 2017 be approved.
The seconder. Councilor Monroe. Any further discussion or comments? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 3, the approval of the minutes. We have Councilor Thompson.
I move that the Governance and Priorities Committee minutes dated October 23rd, 2017 be approved.
Seconder. Councilor Monroe. Any discussion or comments from those minutes? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 4, public presentations. I don't see any additions to that. Thank you, City Manager. Moving to item number 5 on the agenda, administration reports. To the City Manager.
Good morning, Your Worship and Council. A little close there. Good morning. This past week, I guess, has been a bit of a whirlwind given my new start, and so we've the finance department has worked hard to put together today's presentation, and I'd like to recognize their work that they put in. So, Brooke and Adele will present the presentation above with support from Scott and obviously Mike from the finance team. So, I'll call Brooke to the podium.
Thank you very much, City Manager. Very good. Good morning. Good morning.
So thank you for joining us today. As we all know, the budgeting process is currently underway for 2018, and we're very pleased to present to you a very high-level overview of that proposed budget. And as a municipality, I think that we can all agree that we're here to support our residents, and really our intent is to support our residents and our businesses in building a strong and sustainable community through the strategic and responsible budgeting practices and through the development of sound fiscal policies. So throughout the development of the budget, we look to several guiding principles that really shape our thinking and our decision making. Principles such as working within our means, really delivering a balanced budget, providing the best value to our residents at the current service levels, that the budget is a reflection of Council's priorities, that is really Council's priorities, goals, and objectives translated into action. That's what the budget really is. And that we're really thinking about the long term, that we apply long-term strategies now to ensure a healthy financial future for our city. So with these principles in mind, we want to share with you several factors that have really influenced our budgeting process this year. So throughout this presentation, we're really going to talk about where we started at the beginning of this year, where we are today, and where we see ourselves going in the future. We want to share with you the unique set of challenges that we faced at the beginning of this process, brought on by the implementation of our new financial softwares. That was compounded by a significant reorganization of the city. We want to share with you the hurdles we faced in delivering a balanced budget while making great strides in becoming a self-sustaining city. We really wanted to focus on lessening our dependency on future funding sources. And lastly, we want to share with you that despite these challenges, we really intend to persevere and take action today to make preparations for tomorrow that will undoubtedly contribute to a healthier financial future. So our journey really starts when we decided to make a commitment to upgrade our financial systems. That was a big undertaking in 2016. One of those systems is Questica, our new budgeting software. So it was evident at the time, and I think it still rings true today, that our existing system does not really meet our current information needs. We're very limited in our ability to derive information from our existing systems and to report on that information very easily and to share it very easily. So today we find ourselves really manually extracting information and manipulating information in order to satisfy our needs, both internally for our management team, for ELT, and both externally for our city council and for our residents and so forth. So with the implementation of our new system on the horizon back in 2016, we thoughtfully and thoroughly considered our information needs, and we asked ourselves, what information do we use today to make better decisions? What information do we want today to help us make better decisions? And what information do we think we need moving forward to make better decisions for our future? So by really clearly understanding those information requirements and critically evaluating those information requirements, we were able to configure our systems to meet those needs. And that goes down to Questica, our budgeting software. So part of the configuration included restructuring our general ledger accounts. So in order to meet some of the information needs today, we decided to restructure our general ledger accounts for a couple of reasons, well, more than a couple. So firstly, we really wanted to achieve greater consistency and application in the use of our general ledger accounts citywide, so that every single service area is capturing information the same way. Yes?
So this the previous slide we talked about Questica. Is that a module of Diamond, or is it something separate? Because when I went through the slide initially, I was going, all right, so I have Questica, I have Diamond, and how does this all fit together? I guess was a question for me.
That's a great question. Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councilor Diachuk. Really, we have three major systems that we've been implementing. The first, I'd like to focus about Diamond GP. GP is the central, it's the hub for our new financial software. And then we have two other systems that work in conjunction with Diamond GP. So they're all fully integrated, so the information that you have within one system is shared to the two others. Now the two others is Pearl by WorkTech, and Pearl by WorkTech, the true intent of that is to be able to report, able to manage and create reports internally for ourselves, for management. And the other component is Questica that we're talking about today. And Questica is helping us to prepare our budget package, because what we used to do is, we compile spreadsheets. So this new software allows us the ability to put the information into the software, and then we can extract it and reorganize it and really learn from that information in ways we were not able to do very easily in the past.
So this is the first time we're using it then?
It is.
All right.
Yeah, so we're very excited.
Thank you.
No problem. So we talked about reorganizing our our general ledger accounts in order to achieve greater consistency. Another factor, or another thing that we really wanted to focus on is gaining a better understanding of the profitability of our service areas and facilities. And going a step further, understanding the profitability of functions within those service areas. So in accounting terminology, we call this activity-based costing, and it's really focusing on the cost drivers and understanding where we're losing profits today or where we could potentially reduce our expenditures. So learning from our information that we have today. So lastly, we wanted to be able to automatically generate reports on our information that we couldn't necessarily do in the past just due to the general limitations of our system and because our information was not really organized in a way that was conducive to doing so. So the information going into the system has to be organized in a way to make it easier to report on it. So we're really making a shift from a manual process to a more automated process. So we accomplished a full restructuring of our general ledger accounts in the early months of 2017 prior to taking on the configuration of Questica. So then in April we began our work in Questica, and we really intended to start the budgeting process in June or July, around that time. Then came the reorg. So in late June, as a result of the governance audit, we were informed that an organizational restructuring would occur. With that in mind, we decided to delay the training process in order to accommodate any potential changes that would really impact the restructuring of our general ledger accounts. So after the reorg was released in late July, which already had delayed us a little bit, we spent weeks revising the accounting structure. Really, the purpose of sharing this information with you is to provide some context in regards to why we were slightly delayed and why we're sharing the budget at a very high level today. So the new implementation of our budgeting software was a significant undertaking, and it was compounded by the challenges of the reorg that occurred. Another point we'd really like to mention, and very carefully, is that it's important to understand that as we restructured these accounts and as we underwent a reorganization, it's going to be slightly more difficult to compare our service areas today, the way that we have them structured, to the way that we have them structured in the past. So we can do some comparison, but it will be very manual in nature. So that's just a point that I think that we all need to keep in mind when we're looking and comparing yesterday's service areas to today's service areas. So all challenges aside, we're actually very excited to share that we've made some monumental progress in our budgeting processes. This year has been the first time that our entire management team has worked together to evaluate the budget as a whole. We feel that we have everybody focused cohesively as one unit in one direction, and we feel that a lot of success will come from working together. So we provided our management team with very detailed Questica training. We provided training on budgeting best practices. In addition to that, we designed very custom learning materials, and the finance team has really supported our management team in an effort to be better in our budgeting practices. So that's an exciting progress that we've achieved this year. So even in our first efforts, this will be the first year that we are using Questica, even in our first effort to build a new budget, we have learned so much more information than ever before. And we believe this is a direct result of our general ledger restructuring. With these new tools in place and with effective training, we're very confident that we can continuously make improvements in the future that will lead to even more effective budgeting practices. If this is where we are today, I'm very excited to see what the future holds. So lastly, and as I've already mentioned, we've made a shift from a very manual reporting process, just due to the limitations of our existing system. And we're very excited that we have a more automated process. Still needs some refining, still needs some tweaking, but we're going over to an automated process. And with less time spent compiling information, it's really going to redirect our efforts from compiling that information to have more time and energy to analyze and evaluate that information. So the new reporting structure will give us the ability to run reports in an open and transparent manner. So we really hope to answer the questions that we couldn't very easily answer in the past. As I mentioned, we have lost some ability to do some comparative analysis between the service areas from in the past to today, just due to the sheer volume of changes that occurred with the restructuring of the GL and with the reorg. However, the new reporting structure has provided what we believe to be a strong foundation and comparative basis for the future. So moving forward, it's going to be much more easy to analyze and compare service areas.
Sorry, thank you so much.
Yes.
No, I just was going to interrupt just to say, I wouldn't get too hung up on the inability to compare past information to this new information, because the past information, you really couldn't see anything in the surface areas outside total revenue, total expenses. So from a decision-making perspective, not being able to compare that information is almost meaningless, because we have something that's actually valuable that can lead to good decision-making on council's part or management's part, and the ability for individual managers to be accountable to their own budget. So I wouldn't get hung up on that. We're headed in the right direction. So far, everything I'm hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you, Councillor Torson. In all, we've faced some major challenges in the past year, and it's been mainly due to the implementation of our new softwares and due to the reorganization that that was as a result of the governance audit. So the second set of challenges that we faced is really as a result of our goal to develop a long-term strategy for sustainability. So over the past year, the city has developed several long-term strategies to fund operations in a more sustainable way. So to date, the city has been relying on alternative sources of funds, or unsustainable sources of funds, so to speak, to supplement operations. Funds such as profits from land sales, profits from water utilities, and the use of our capital levy. So to mitigate our dependency, we've taken several efforts and developed several fiscal policies in order to eliminate that dependency. So policies and efforts such as completely eliminating our dependency on profits from land sales, gradually eliminating our dependency on profits from water utilities, establishing a municipal stabilization reserve, and establishing a capital replacement reserve. So those are some big initiatives that we undertook, very, very recently. So that's a second set of challenges that we wanted to focus on. So in terms of revenues, we've experienced an overall decrease in operating revenues, which is why our dependency on land, things like land sales, the capital levy, and the water utilities exist today. But really, why are our operating revenues not supplementing or not funding our operations? So to kind of answer the question in a very simplistic nature, even though it's slightly more complex, essentially our property taxes haven't increased proportionally year over year to meet the increased cost of providing services. So in the graph that we have up here, what the graph is trying to illustrate or to depict is really to do a comparison between our actual tax levy compared to where we could have been. So along the left-hand side, you'll see millions of dollars from 0 up to 45 million. And then along the bottom, you'll see a 10-year span from 2006 to 2016. I'd like to focus on the trend in orange. The trend in orange is our actual revenues at the current mill rate. So the increase you're seeing from 2006 to 2016 is primarily due to the growth in our assessment tax base, because our assessment tax base times our mill rate is really our true property tax levy. So along the bottom, you can see that primarily due to growth, we've gone from roughly about 11 million to 27 million. That's primarily due to the assessment growth. Now, the other trend in blue, you'll see, this is an estimated revenue with a 2% annual increase. So you can see that from 2006 to 2016, had we increased property taxes 2% annually, we could have gone from 11 million to almost 41 million. So really the gap between 2006, yes?
Sorry to interrupt. When you say increasing taxes, do you mean just increasing the mill rate? Or you're saying, is that accounting for also the increased number of properties with that growth?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Torson. What we're focusing on here in this information is that our assessment tax base times our mill rate is the value of our property taxes, and this graph just reflects the value of our property taxes. Does that answer your question?
So it's both in combination. It's not just one or the other.
It's primarily due to the assessment tax base. My understanding is we haven't increased our mill rate. It's just the growth from our assessment tax base. Is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah, no, I think that's clear.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's because we know we've seen growth in the community. I think everyone's seen that growth, but the problem was the growth, we allowed growth to carry us, but the growth wasn't carrying us like it would have had we adjusted for inflation or GPC or CPI, the index that goes along with everything else.
Yeah, and I think if you, sorry, but if you look at the values there's constants in both of them, which would be the value, the assessment value. So the only difference would be the taxation level that's changed. Because in both graphs, your assessment value will be that's the constant, each of the calculations.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. What we're focusing on here is the 2006 mill rate was 4.5 in that year. So we're adding 2% increase to that mill rate year over year. And this chart is actually reflecting changes in assessments, but it's also taking into account that there were decreases to the mill rate done year over year by other councils.
Yes.
So if it had stayed at 4.5 and just increased 2% per year, we'd be at 41 million. The 27 million is a result of decreases to mill rates and increases to assessment fees. Your 27th tax year is not in there yet because we don't have all the data in place, but we lost over 500 million in tax base for that year last year. So once I get those numbers together, I'll provide those as well.
Thank you. Just to be clear, so in 2009, 2010, because there would have been an increase in the number of properties, they would have had to have decreased the mill rate to get the same amount of revenue in those years?
Yes, typically what they did was they looked at supplementary assessments that were accounted for. So if it came in to be $80 million worth of taxable because of the supplementary, which actually happened in 2009, they rolled the mill rate back so that we stayed even. So we've lost a lot of revenue over the years, but they went from 4.5, I think, to 3.98, and they continue to go downwards until we started to go up over the past 2 years.
Okay.
But all this growth is because of growth, not because of mill rates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for clarifying. Do we have any other questions about the graph, or does it make sense to everybody what we're trying to illustrate?
Well, I think it's very clearly illustrated on the graph. Very clearly illustrated.
So the last point we really wanted to make on this graph is the gap between where we are to where we could have been is roughly about 65 million over the past 10 years. So the next set of challenges we faced in developing a balanced budget are in regards to our expenditures. And as we all know, expenditures, the cost in delivering and providing services, it does rise year over year. And it's a relatively modest increase in line with inflation. So that's another challenge that we have. And the last part about expenditures is really about how we wanted to make a commitment to increase our reserve balances for our future needs. So that's an added-on expenditure that we have today. So that's another challenge to cover those additional expenditures. We have to have slightly more revenues. So I hope I've been able to answer a lot of questions about where we started with this budgeting process, and I'm sure you're all very eager to hear where we are today. So I'll pass it along to Brooke, who will continue on with the presentation.
Worship, if I may, before you step away from the podium there. There's been a pile of work put in by everybody to get this point done so far. So my thanks for everything as a council, I think we've thrown a heck of a lot of changes. And everybody, starting with the audit and everything else that we've done, doesn't go unnoticed by us that you guys are adapting to those changes because you don't have to, right? You could have fought it at every turn. Right? I don't see, from our perspective, I don't see that happened. But out of curiosity's sake, I was curious as to what the mood of the staff is around all of this from then to now in going through this process. And you talked about excitement for the future and so on and so forth, which is great. We're happy with that too. But the process, how did the staff handle the whole process from your assessment of that? And is there anything more that you want to see from us as a council in that regard?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Buckingham. I think that's a really big question, and I think, I can answer personally and maybe a little bit reflection in terms of our finance team. Also, Councillor Torsten made some comments in terms of the information we're going to get from these new systems. I think that's where I personally get very excited, and I think that our finance team gets very excited because we'll be able to answer these questions a lot easier than we have been able to in the past. But in regards to the mood of our city, I think maybe our chief of staff could maybe speak to that. But thank you so much for asking the question.
Yeah, thank you, Raj. We hear it from the chief of staff and our management team and everything else. I was more curious from your perspective. I know you can't speak for everybody, but
Yeah. But from a finance perspective, and I think personally speaking, I'm very excited to see how we're going to learn from this information and make better decisions internally and externally as a community. So that's where I'm coming from when I say, I'm excited. And I think I can say on behalf of the finance team, I think we're very excited to see what kind of growth and progress we can make and just support that.
good.
Yeah.
I think on our behalf, just thank you from my perspective.
Indeed, thank you very much. I think that you've given us just in that piece that you've given us, it's certainly gives us the background because there's still questions, I'm sure, about people. Why? And some of those questions will be answered, but some of those questions were previous administrations and councils, so certainly we'll move forward because that's what we can do. We can look and learn from the past and we can move forward. So you've given us some good information on the past and we're looking forward to where we go from today on. Thank you for all your hard work because we did not, certainly I think council, I can speak on their behalf at this point, say that, the governance audit brought us to a point and the reorganization, and each one of these steps has ripple effect, and certainly we're seeing it affect today's budget to where we're at and where we'd like to be and where we want to get to. So I think that by all means that we didn't realize that the waves would go as far as they did, but that being said, it needed to be done. And we're at where we're at. So thank you very much for persevering with your council as we've set the direction from our side. Councilor Torsten.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to get us too far off track, but I'm wondering if for a future budget meeting we have the same type of graph that maybe shows the increase in costs for the same, because revenue is one side of the equation. So if you're a taxpayer in the city, you want to know, well, not only how much money did we miss out on, but how can we be as efficient as possible? And I understand that when we went through the budget process last year, we made it as tight and efficient as possible. But from their perspective, as tight, as efficient as possible is an absolute must every time when it's public dollars. So I'd just be interested in seeing some sort of graph that would show, I don't know, per resident or cost per, almost on a mill type basis when we're looking at the property tax side of things. I don't know what the right answer is because we have created so many false economies in the past on the revenue side of things that it makes things very confusing to do. But just on the general services that are required or that we provide as a city, what's the cost to individual residents on that side? And not necessarily where is the property tax dollar going to, but just having a cost side to the same kind of argument for increases in property taxes. Because they have to happen together, both sides.
I was going to say, Your Worship, thank you. That certainly one of the areas that I know that people had asked me questions about over the years was the cost of administration. And some of the historical data would see this was growing significantly, tripling, I think, over 3 to 5 years, whatever. And I think there's some of those areas that we should be able to put out and show actually the work that's been done in the organization to really address that in a dramatic way. So I think there's categories, and I don't know if that's where you're leading to or not, but I think there's some categories that can be pulled out that would show the difference in terms of the strategy, the direction, and overall organization. Those would be, I think, critical.
I don't want to speak for the finance team, but I'm assuming the inability to do activity-based costing in the past is going to make that extremely challenging. So it may have to be on a total cost overall and taking out the things that we know really have nothing to do with residents, like land development type things that really only relate to new properties. And utilities were kept relatively separate in the past and have those out on their own. But just having a good understanding of how our costs increased over the same time frame. Because I think that really tells the whole story. It can't just be one side of the equation, you've got to have both sides. Thanks.
I agree with both your councilors' comments. I think that what we would look for, just by what I'm understanding, is we need a total cost to to show, so they can overlay that so people have understand where the expense drivers have been and where it's taken us. Because that's really what we're looking at is a total dollar. And as you said, I think it'd be hard to drive down today. Now in 3 years, 2 years, hopefully we can have some comparables moving forward with the new software. But I think that for now, if we could show people this is where the revenue was, where it could have been, we've got that. This is where the expenses have gone. Then we can give them some idea of where that cost drivers have been at. And we'll get the detail that we really like to see. We know we have, it's been difficult. We appreciate you working with spreadsheets for as long as you have. And, trying to draw it all together at the finance department. And I think that even the staff in the various departments will enjoy knowing where they're actually, what is costing the money and where it's really being driven down to. When you're looking at it at the top end rather than right down to the bottom end from their perspective, they can manage better, especially with the management team that we have in place all the way through. I think the management had the opportunity to be involved in this budget, which will be a real change as we understand from our perspective. I think that will give them the empowerment they need to make better decisions at the field level, which affect everybody in our city.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, thank you for the advice, and we will prepare something for the second draft of the budget. And thank you for the recognition on the efforts on behalf of the entire city and the management and all of our teams that have come together to put forth what we have today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Good morning and welcome, Brooke.
So when we look at where we are today, in outlining the operating budget for 2018, we wanted to redisplay how you guys were seeing the information. Because the 2017 budget identified a need to look at where our revenues and expenses were coming from in terms of land and utilities. If we were going to change the way that those revenues were allocated, we need to change the way that we were displaying the information. So when we look at land development specifically, we anticipate that 2018 will be lower than what was budgeted for land development in 2017 in terms of lot sales, but consistent with what we're seeing in 2017. And we're anticipating an overall surplus of about $390,000 for land development in 2018. When we look at water utilities, we're anticipating that our 2018 budget will be in line with our 2017 budget, and are anticipating an overall surplus of $5.9 million from water utilities. When we look at operating revenues, we are anticipating a decrease in some of our revenue sources. And in order to make up some of those revenue sources that have been decreasing, we need to look at increasing our property taxes to recover some of those funds. We're also anticipating to increase transfers from reserves in 2018. So in 2017, when we presented the operating forecast earlier this summer, we were projecting a $3 million surplus from 2017 operations. And so we're proposing to carry that forward to 2018 budget to supplement some of those revenues. When we look at our operating expenditures, we just wanted to note that they do include the third-party asks. We have included all of the third-party asks at the same level that we had included in the 2017 budget, with the exception of LGCC, which we did include an increase from 2017 levels. Everybody that has submitted a third-party funding request will be bringing them forward and as part of the November 20th GPC meeting for your guys' review. So when we look at,
Thank you. Just a quick question on the third-party asks, because you would have received those by this point. Is the assumption that all asks are granted, or was there just some internal assumptions made? You don't have to say specifically, but were there internal assumptions made as to the amounts that were going to be given on those third-party asks?
For the most part, we assumed that they would be approved at the same level as last year, but some community groups have asked for additional funding. We've also received requests from an additional group that hasn't requested funding in the past. So any changes that are made to the levels of funding will definitely, change the budget.
Thank you.
So when we look at our total revenues and expenses overall, we're anticipating total revenues of 81 million, or 82.1 million, sorry, for 2018. And our total operating expenses are projected to be about 80.6 million, which will leave an estimated surplus of 1.6 million. With that surplus of 1.6 million, we want to take 100% of the revenues and transfer those to the capital program. And with water utilities, we want to take 20% of the surplus and transfer it to capital reserves, which shows our commitment to slowly weaning ourselves off of those revenues from operations as we set up in the 2017 budget. So after we consider the surplus and then taking that surplus and transferring it to reserves, we are looking at a balanced budget for 2018 on the operations side. So this next slide shows a bit of a comparison between our 2017 final budget and this first draft of the 2018 budget. So I'll just kind of go through and highlight some of the changes that have happened from 2017 to 2018 draft one. So on the revenue side, like I mentioned before, we are expecting a decrease in some of our revenue sources, including operating grants, licenses and permits, some of the one-time revenues that we had included in last year's budget, and a small decrease in our user fees. And so in order to make up for that decrease in revenues, we are anticipating we will need an increase of property taxes to offset some of that. In addition to, so for the property tax increase, we are proposing to increase it by 1 mil. For the commercial property taxes, we are proposing an increase of the commercial factor from 1.6 to 1.8, which would bring the commercial factor back to the same level it was at in 2012. The increase in the capital levy of 209,000 would be a direct result of increasing the increasing the commercial levy from a factor of 1.6 to a 1.8. The transfers from reserves, again, they're increasing because we are anticipating a surplus at the end of 2017 and are proposing to take that surplus and use it to supplement our 2018 operating revenues. We're also proposing a small transfer from reserves. On the expense side, the increase in expenses is aligned with the increased costs of providing services that the residents and businesses in our community expect. And when we look at transfers to reserves, again, it's transferring 100% of 100% of land development revenues and 20% of utility revenues. So this is a very high level of our capital budget for 2018. Between capital grants and transfers from capital reserves, land sales, and operating revenue that we want to allocate to capital, we've identified about $42.4 million of funding available for capital projects for 2018. We would also like to point out that at this time we're not proposing to use debt to fund any projects for 2018. Subject to change with developments and Louis structures and plans and things like that. So this is showing a comparison between 2017 approved budget and where we are for 2018 draft one. So you'll notice that there's an increase in capital grants, a significant increase to capital grants by about $11.5 million. And those two grants are to fund two specific projects. So we have $6 million budgeted for the Builds Canada Small Community Fund, which can be used to fund the wastewater treatment plant. And then we have another almost $5.5 million from Transport Canada to pay for that airport taxi rehab program. The increase in transfers from capital reserves come from some carryover projects that have been allocated grant funding in 2017. So 2 examples of that would be the landfill cell. We done that project at the end of 2017, and it was to be funded through grants, so we're going to carry that over to 2018. The other would be the new financial system. There's a little bit of work that will need to be done in 2018 for that as well, and so we're carrying some of that funding over to next year. And then in addition to that, there was some 2017 like Alberta federal gas tax funds that weren't allocated to any project, and so there are some time limits on using those funds, and so we want to use them in 2018. For land sales, again, we are predicting fewer land sales than were budgeted in 2017, but that are consistent with what we've seen in 2017. So the net revenue of $390,000 that we're anticipating we will be using for the capital program in 2018. And then operating funds allocated to capital. So when we developed the capital asset replacement reserve in 2017, that policy said that we would take funds that are approximately equal to amortization and use them to fund the ongoing replacement of our existing infrastructure so that we can ensure that we're maintaining it to those standards that our residents and businesses expect. So overall, when we look at expenses, in 2017 we had budgeted $25 million to be used between the capital projects and capital debt repayment. In 2018, we're looking at $42.4 million for capital projects and debt repayment. So that's an increase of about $17 million. At this time, we're not proposing to do a transfer to the capital asset replacement reserve, but administration is in the process of going through all of the projects that all of the managers have submitted for 2018 capital projects. And so depending on which projects are approved and which projects are deferred to future years will determine whether we are going to be doing a transfer to the reserve or not. So when we look at the expenses last year versus this year and take into consideration the transfers to reserves, overall we're looking at an increase in the capital program of about $12 million. And we just wanted to point out that the majority of that additional expense is being covered through the additional provincial and federal grants and not by additional municipal sources.
Thanks, sorry to interrupt, Brooke. I just want that last part to be really clear to people is that these capital grants, the increase of 17 million, the substantial majority is because of capital grants. That's 11,472,000 of the 17 million. Just so the public understands, we're not increasing property taxes by that amount. That is how much is capital grants that we are going to be receiving that we will spend on applicable projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. So in developing the 2018 budget initial draft, we have made some assumptions. So one of the assumptions is that our property assessment values have remained unchanged from 2017. The second is that Council will support continued use of the capital levy to be used for operations, and maybe we need to think about renaming that levy from a capital levy to a municipal levy, if you're agreeable to that. We've also assumed that we will be increasing the mill rate by 1 mil, and that we will be increasing the commercial factor from the factor of 1.6 to 1.8. On the expense side, we've assumed that by deferring some of the projects that were initially brought forward for consideration, that we won't be impacting current service levels. We've also assumed that third-party requests will be the same as 2017 with the exception of LGCC. When we look at the surplus or deficit, we've assumed that the desire for the city to reduce and eventually eliminate its dependency on land and utility surpluses, and to develop a model to ensure operations are self-sustainable is still a priority. We assume that we will eliminate our dependency on utility surpluses over a 5-year period. So by 2023, that we would not be using land or utilities at all to support operations. So all of, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make a quick comment on that last slide as far as limiting the dependency on water utilities and surpluses over the next 5 years. That's not something, this is something the council has talked about in strategic planning type meetings, nothing that's been necessarily decided on, but it's something that's probably absolutely necessary. When we look at the debt repayments that are going to be coming up in the next few years, when you combine that with the fact that you have other pieces of aging infrastructure, for too long the water profits have supplemented the operations of the city in general, and by not keeping them separate, it's put so much more pressure on the mill rates and the property taxes now that, you know, something needs to be done. And in the long term, they need to be kept separate because there's big projects that need to be replaced, and there's big debt payments that are going to be coming with these new projects. And it's something that we just have to do. It's not really, you know, a strategic option one way or another. It's something that you have to do. The other thing, eliminating dependency on land surpluses in 2018. Fantastic that we're doing that now. Like, it's really too bad that we've had such poor land sales as a reflection of the economy. But at the end of the day, we need to get away from the point where we are putting more pressure on property taxes by relying on land sales, because whenever you have land sales, that means you have growth. When you have growth, you have more pressure on your infrastructure. When you have more pressure on your infrastructure, it breaks down quicker, it breaks down sooner, and you need, you know, enhancements, upgrades, and things to be able to deal with all the growth you just had. So if you don't eliminate that dependency, you are driving yourself into a very sticky situation, and it's one that we're in right now, where we have huge projects that we don't know how we're going to pay for, and we haven't put money aside to pay for them at the end of the day because we didn't use those land sale profits to deal with all the growth we had from the land sales. Thank you.
Yes.
Unfortunately, just to build on that too, because certainly in talking to, you know, members of the community, pardon me, one of the things we do here is that you know, keep the taxes low, and then realize their utility rates go up, and then so what I hear when I go do my shopping in business, man, the utilities are high, but people never say why our taxes are low. And I think part of this comparator that does exist is that we speak to family members and friends who live in a different city and begin to compare. We always do it. And I said, and I think the problem, and I guess the direction, as you're hearing, is that our model needs to be more like others that have recognized that, you know, parts of this are unsustainable, and the direction we're going is more consistent, I think. So I agree. I think then it gives you an apples to apples comparator with other municipalities and cities.
Yes, thank you. I think we're all in alignment on that. So the assumptions that we have made in preparing the 2018 draft one of the budget, they obviously have impacts, various impacts on the community. One of the more significant ones will be the increases in property taxes that we're proposing. So if you look at an average household that's valued at $350,000, the impact of increasing the property taxes by $1 million will be an increase to their property taxes of $350 a year, or $29 a month. And when we looked at it on residential property, the increase in 1 mil combined with increasing the commercial factor by 0.2 will have an impact of $2,692 per year, or $224 a month on an average property of $1 million.
So, if I may, as we look at this, are we going to do, and I'm not sure I heard it or didn't hear it, I guess, but is there any attempt to be made relative to the rates on our utilities? Is there a change predicted there, or are utility rates going to stay the same? So that's, as we're moving in this 5-year plan or whatever it is, as we see the mill rate going up, are we anticipating any adjustment to utilities for the upcoming year? And I'm not sure I saw that in there. So the plan is to leave it to the same as it is?
Thank you, Your Worship, through Councillor Diachuk. I believe we have a 3-year rate plan set out for utilities already. I'm not exactly sure when it started and when it ends, but we can look
Okay,
at
no,
that.
sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was going to be an adjustment.
But I think Councillor Fide gathers from this information, we're looking at moving 20% of that income that comes in as the goal of our utilities to that reserve to help build for water utilities, and that be water, wastewater, going forward, if I understood that correctly in the discussion. So I may not see a decrease in rate, but that money is going to be put into a fund, a capital fund, which Councillor Baker often refers to, having a piggy bank. That should be there to cover off some of those costs that Councillor Torson has alluded to. And we've been discussing it since this council got here. The wastewater treatment plant is not going to come free. There will be a cost to our city. And certainly the goal is to not be our total cost with government grants, but I think that's the money that we're going to look for and need to go forward. Okay, we'll have some of that as we move forward, as we build.
And I guess in addition to that, we have purchased some software specific to water and wastewater utilities that will incorporate our projected water utility revenues and expenses over the next up to 20 years, and capital as well up to 20 years. And then it'll help model what our rates should be, what would be a fair rate to be charging residents and businesses. So we'll be looking at that to help determine our rates going forward. So when we look at the impact of transferring money from reserves, again, we're predicting to have a surplus from the 2017 budget and to use that surplus to offset some of the decreases in other revenue sources for our 2018 budget. We do have to do some further analysis just to ensure that we're still predicting that $3 million surplus at the end of the year, and that cash flow will permit the use of that surplus in the 2018 operating budget. The impact of our assumptions on operating expenses. So we've assumed that deferring projects to a future year isn't going to affect service levels, and we've also assumed that we would be approving third-party asks at the same rate as 2017. So if those assumptions change, then it'll just cost some rejigging of the numbers to ensure that we maintain a balanced budget.
So Brooke, on that slide there, make sure the third-party funding remains the same in 2017. We've already identified one that isn't.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So is the one that isn't identified in this slide 2? Because it says, assuming it remains the same, we already know one's not.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the Councillor Buckingham. Yes, sorry, I misspoke. The LGCC one is included at a higher rate. So yes, we are assuming that everything will remain the same except for LGCC. So if that isn't the case, then yeah, we'll have to change some other revenues or expenses to maintain our budget. When we look at the impact of transferring money to reserves, we assume that the community and council is still committed to ensuring the future sustainability of the city, and in order to do that, we are going to have to build up our operating and capital reserves.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt quick. Executive Manager Don Stan, do you have the number off the top of your head for what our capital replacement needs are over the next 10 to 15 years from the master plans? Just because I think it's important to discussing future reserves.
Thank you, Your Worship, through Councillor Torson. When we looked at the capital needs over the next 20 years as part of our offsite levy review, it was, excuse me, it was estimated to be around $550 million.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the number that was in my head, is nearly $500 million over the next 20 needs to be reinvested into the capital of this city. So when residents start seeing some of this, well, what are these reserves for? You know, why don't we do it a different way? Or, you know, why do we have to start doing it now? Well, the reality is if you were to look at our financial statements right now, they might say $500 million in total assets. So we have to double up on that in the next 20 years and replace a lot of things to be able to stay sustainable as a city. Thank you.
So to make strides towards increasing our reserves, we are proposing to take the 100% of land development reserves and put them into a capital reserve, then taking them and use them for capital projects for 2018, and to also take 20% of utility revenues or surplus and put them in capital reserves. So where we want to go in terms of future drafts of the 2018 budget and future budgets, we want to continue down the path of achieving self-sustaining operations, land development, and water utilities. We want to build our capital and operating reserves from current levels so that one-time events can be funded by the transfer from reserves rather than increasing the mill rate to handle that one-time event. It will also allow us to be more proactive in addressing any emergent needs and meeting our long-term goals. We want to use the new software programs and tools that are in place to perform more analysis on the information that we're putting into the system. We also want to use the new program to do some benchmarking with other communities to identify the things that we're doing really well and things that could be improved. The additional information that we can obtain with our new systems will also allow us to do more activity-based costing, which will aid in the performance-based decision-making. So in summary, today we've provided a really high-level overview of the draft 2018 budget. Administration will continue to review department operating capital budgets to ensure that our ratepayers are receiving the best value for their money. Administration, and in partnership with council, I'm sure will continue to work with all levels of government to make sure that we're getting all of the government funding that we can. And we look forward to obtaining additional input from council and the community, which we will incorporate into future budgets. Residents and businesses can email their thoughts and ideas to your voice at wayminster.ca.
Thank you very much, Brooke.
Thanks, Brett.
Any questions, comments, council? I think the rubber, as they say, hits the road right here. I think administration is presenting a very clear and concise picture of where history has brought us to, because that's really what we look back at as the history and the direction of our city. We're at a point now that we're going to be faced with major capital expenditures, decrease in the assessment potential this year. We know that the government of Saskatchewan has already indicated there will be 6.8% less revenue sharing due to the drop in the economy in Saskatchewan. We're still waiting patiently on the Alberta government grants and announcements that will come. And in many cases, discussions with the government, this always seems to happen after we put our budget together. Then comes the end of March, and provincial governments drop their budgets on us, and then we wait for more surprises and have to adjust accordingly. There's certainly the style that the city has went with taking land sale money and applying it to general operations is showing up very clearly. We saw a $10 million deficit in the past over the last couple of years. Our utility bills have subsidized taxpayers. The city's tax-paying people has meant from water utilities over to general operations. And we've got some huge costs incurred there. So I think that thank you to administration for laying out the facts as best as they can lay out, because I think that's really what we need to deal with is the facts that are at hand today. We can't change what's happened in the past, but this council can set direction going forward. And I think that's what we're going to be tasked with, work with administration to ensure that we are providing, as they said, the best value to our taxpayers that we can. Administration has looked at things. We've certainly challenged them this past year with many different aspects of the operation, and we'll continue to do that and raise the questions. But I think that we've got a starting place. I leave it to council for any other comments. Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Shout out to the finance team. I really appreciate what this document does, especially at this stage, and especially knowing that there's more granularity coming on the individual departments. That was something that I may or may not have squawked quite a bit about back in January, and I love to know that that we can get there and have some good quality information that's useful in decision making. Some of the other things that we're doing, the activity-based costing thing, huge. Very important to be able to do that, especially when we look at holding individual managers accountable for their own departments, so they understand where they're overspending, where they're not overspending. Maybe there's a capital issue that we haven't identified yet, and we only figure it out because we see it's costing so much for repairs and maintenance on something. To be able to do that, to allocate it to a specific cost center, is going to be very valuable to taxpayers in the long term for identifying issues, so that we can deal with them and still uphold high standards as far as the quality of services and programs we deliver. The other thing it's going to be able to do, ideally, in my vision for it, is to be able to set service levels, to understand, especially over the last week when we're talking about road plows, is to be able to get all the road plow costs together, and to be able to say, okay, this is how much it costs per hour or per linear foot for them to run it, and we can figure that stuff out just based on being able to accumulate all the costs in one spot. And then we can say to residents, okay, if you would like us to do more, well, here's a calculation of how much more it's going to cost, and this is the price. And then we can take feedback from residents and implement it into operations to actually, make strides towards making people happier if there is a particular issue with it, or to pull back if there isn't a problem there. The other thing I just wanted to say was, overall, absolutely, I can't say that I'm happy with what the end result is going to possibly be, which is an increase in property taxes, if we end up going in that direction and the other drafts of the budget point us there and we don't find any other efficiencies somewhere. Definitely not happy with that, but it is what it is. We are where we are today because of whatever reasons, and we've got to deal with the information that's in front of us, and we've got to look out 20 years down the road on behalf of residents, and sometimes that means making hard decisions, and that's life. That's what it's all about. And anyone could have said anything, prior to being elected, but when you don't have all this information, when even the public didn't have all this information, some of administration didn't even have all this information at the time. You say whatever, but at the same time, you got to do what you got to do once you get here, and you have to have some vision. You got to be able to take some licks from the public if they're not exactly happy with that. Thank you.
Any other councillors?
Thank you, Worship. I think it's one of the pieces that I'm pleased with is sort of the coming together of not only the staff component and the leadership from that end. We see a number of policies, decisions around contributions towards reserves. Those pieces are important to shape and guide us going forward. And I think lastly is, there is going to need to be the will to make some of the decisions that aren't always going to be, politically in favor. No one likes to see an increase. And I think that's why it's going to be really important to be able to make sure we have the information. We have that now and access to be able to portray it in a way that people can see that if you want to end up over there and you're here, there is a pathway, and this is how you need to get here. And I particularly like the notion of a 5-year plan to sort of get us going in the direction, while keeping in mind, there's $500 million worth of capital, and recognizing that there is a pathway beyond the 5 years as well. And so that short term versus long term versus today is really requires that information that we need to have access to. So I'm really pleased that we have these pieces that are coming together to be able to keep us nimble, if you like, but also be able to bring those numbers forward in a way that makes sense, so people can see, well, plan A, plan B. If you follow B, this is what happens, and if you follow A, this is what happens. So we have that choice and ability to weigh one against the other. So I think it feels good. it may not look like it's a great place to be, but I think if you're ever wanted to be in a position where you have information to guide you and make sure that you have all the information, I think we're as close as we've ever been. And I just think even from our own council, professional development, costing, going to conferences and the like, and our input around that, monitoring our own costs and being able to actually see our own budget, which we didn't last year. We will now have access to do that, and I think all of those point to, again, accountability, transparency, and those pieces that were really critical a year ago, getting us to this point. So I'm really, really comfortable with this.
Any other council comments?
Yeah, I agree with both Jonathan and Michael and all the comments. One of the questions I had is with the new budget software, the Questka, does that allow us to look at budgeting on for 2018, 19, 20 on the same sheet?
Yeah, it does. It gives us the ability to do 3-year budgeting.
The 3-year budgeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important as well for people to see where we're going and just set some goals there. So that's great.
So I guess one thing I want to ask administration, we've got a very high level 2018 proposal for budget. I would expect we will see another budget, a more detailed budget coming forward back to this council, either at GPC or in council, to start this discussions as we continue on. Can the administration give us an idea of when we may expect that back from?
Thank you, Your Worship. The intention is to come back on November 20th, next GBC, with a more detailed budget.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think that's what's important as well, that people realize that this budget will be discussed in public throughout this process if it hasn't passed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kind of in the same point, I guess, as what Gerald was just asking. Generally, this process looks a little bit different, and because of our own decisions, it hasn't looked the way it's normally supposed to. So you start with a strategic plan leads to strategic priorities, which leads to business plans. Business plans drive the budget. But now we're in a situation where the strategic plan at the top level has happened. Now the budget at the top level has happened. Do we have any indication of what things look like as far as the cascading goals and priorities followed by business plans that are attached to these budgets might look like? I know you've been sitting in that chair for about 6 days, so I have not 3 days. So expectations are very high here, very high standards.
Thank you. That would be the intention, would be to follow up any department money requests with business plans to support why you need the money and the importance of defending why you need the money, whatever that project might be, whatever that operational aspect might be. That would be the intention in the future for sure. And I believe some of that has been done. Probably not to the extent that we like, but that'll be the intent in the future for sure.
Just one more clarifying question. Will the individual capital purchases be attached to the departments as well, or will that be kind of a separate activity where capital is over here and operating is over here, or do the capital items get pushed in with those individual departments who are looking for a capital item?
I might pass that off to Scott to answer. Ordell.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Torson. Yes, we can to some degree have it presented in a way that it's linked to the specific costing center or job worker service area, however you want to define it. So yes, we can understand how much capital needs per particular service area. We will get better over time, but for now we will have a general breakdown.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And my perspective is just when you're looking at, I know big picture, we see this big picture, but when you're looking at the big picture of the individual service area, it's great to know, what does it cost us in both operating and capital for that particular area? So then long-term decisions can be made, long-term strategies can be made in the city overall. Not saying that I'm looking to privatize anything, that's not my goal, but it's just having an understanding of what the individual area's total cost is, rather than looking at solely an operating cost and then budget over there, and not being able to really compare when you don't have them put together in a way. Thank you.
Yeah, further to that too, this year is something different than we haven't done in the past is every capital item will have a brief summary of why it's coming to the table, why we feel it's a priority, and what it's intended to do in the city.
Awesome. Great.
Councillor
Thank you, Worship. I think the last slide of the presentation probably could use one bit of reiteration here. We're hearing now that we're going to get another draft of this on the 20th. That's great. It's also that time where people that have opinions, concerns, that kind of thing, we put it was in the last slide by administration that this is the time for public consultation. Right? As you see us out there, for sure. If you got something specific, send it to your voice@lloydminster.ca. Get those things out there because that will obviously help us or help administration to bring that next draft forward. So this next 15 days or so is 14 days is the time to get those concerns brought to the administration. So if you've got that opinion, you've got that thought, this is the time.
Good point, Councillor.
And I'm not sure, this might be a little redundant, but even if you were to see a one-page sort of flow chart, if you like, of all the steps that have gone into the budgeting process, because you've done a lot of work already, and then so then, you know, this is a step in the process, and so those next steps. And does it mean it's by each area or whatever it is? And so we can see that if it's a 5 or a 6 step process, what kind of work we can anticipate. Because I guess as we get feedback, it's pretty tough to respond to some of the feedback if you don't have a sense of, you know, what those steps are going forward. We had a pretty compressed schedule last year around it, so it's difficult to compare it, and I don't want to compare it. But I guess I wouldn't mind, I guess, Dion, even from your experience in terms of what's done, but then the experiences Mike has had. And so we have basically 3 different municipalities here that we can pool in terms of what those steps might look like. So it's a map for us. So even the city wants, you know, residents want to look at it, pardon me, we can have it. You know, we're at this step right now. The next step is here, and that's the next step along the way. So feedback can be, you know, relative to where we're at. Because everybody, you know, the responses we may get may be, you know, at the last step. And or, you know, really should have been dealt with at another point. So it's kind of helping, I think, shape the comments, the timing of the comments, so there's some sort of strategy to both input as well as decision making. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Your Worship, for Councilor Garcia. We did have that discussion actually on Friday, setting that timetable.
Okay.
And that will be going forward for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councillor Monroe.
I just want to thank everyone for obviously the hard work and dedication that's went into this so far. But I think it's important to note that everything that Councillor Thorson has, just to reiterate everything and echo that we're at this point right now with the need to create these reserves because of what's been done in the past. And it's, although we may have to increase taxes, it's not because of something, obviously this isn't what we'd want to see, but it may be something that has to be done because of lack of allocation in the proper places in prior years. So moving forward, hopefully we're on the right track and things will be, yeah. But thank you everyone for all of your hard work. Scott, Brooke, Adele, Michael, everybody.
Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question was just around resident engagement in general. I don't know if we've had any conversations yet about having a Your Voice night. I realize they can be kind of expensive and sometimes very poor turnout, but when you talk about property taxes and budget and things that are driving, you know, individuals' personal pocketbooks, I think it's always important to get some feedback and get some ideas. And I don't think after the first draft of the budget would be appropriate because really it leaves a lot more questions than answers for a lot of people. Not to say it wasn't a fantastic presentation, but just individuals, they need a little more, I would think they need a little more detail and refinement before, you know, they would get too worked up about it. But do we have anything on the books possibly planned, or I would like to consider suggesting that we do some sort of resident engagement surrounding, you know, a future draft of the budget once the details are a little more hammered out, so that, you know, wherever we land, we can have the opportunity to defend the city's position and our positions on why we landed on that particular spot. And just, you know, generally speaking, for residents, this is draft 1. This is not the final budget. Last year's draft 1 had a $10.5 million deficit. Things change in these budgets from draft 1 to final draft. So just be conscious of the fact that this isn't necessarily where we're landed on. This is just what things look like with the current information and at this high level right now. But it still could change one way or another to a certain extent. Thanks.
I'll pass to Leo for comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Torson. So if it was the will of council, certainly we are prepared to put together, there's all kinds of different public engagement exercises we can do. We could potentially look at some surveying, we could look at an open house night or a coffee with council type event again. I would also like to, just for council's information and for those in attendance here, we will be posting the budget package that you saw here today at lordminster.ca/budget for ease of access. And we'll also create some opportunity there for residents to leave comments and provide some feedback perhaps on what kind of engagement they would like to see around the budget process. But as far as specific tactics, we would rely on the will council related to our city manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. From my perspective, what I would really like to see is when we get further down the line of a more detailed draft budget and it's looking closer to what the final picture looks like, and that's presented assuming at a future GPC prior to ever going to council for an actual vote. I think it would be great to get resident feedback at that stage so that people are, you don't want to do it after the fact because people are going to feel as though they're, speaking to a wall, the decision's been made, what's the point of me speaking up if I feel a certain way? We want to be able to get real feedback from people and to be able to defend, individual positions on the individual items on the budget. So I think that's important and give people the opportunity to do that. If they decide not to, well, that's their own choice. But I think it'd be really great for council to, have that communication with people so that their voice can be heard and it can go directly to the decision makers as to how they're feeling about things. And that's thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Thorson. I think that our council will continue to go that way with public engagement to ensure that we have the understanding and the knowledge from the citizens and our taxpayers, and hopefully the receivers of the programs and services that our city provides, and make sure that we have a clear understanding of the priorities that our residents want and move forward. If I can add to some of the discussion further, some of the things that just as we've been discussing, I think there's a couple areas that I would like to see us, we've got the chart now with the actual tax levy versus the potential where it could be. I think that the administration can prepare a chart on the reserves from 2006 to 2016 of our city, so that will help taxpayers understand where we're at today. I think we can do the same with total costs on the operational side, the capital budget side, as well as government grants, because there's several factors, I think, if we look back over a period of time that have led us to where we are today. We've had capital construction in our city, and our city is carried on without any support from either level of the provincial or federal governments in numerous cases. And we look to the immediately to our west, the RCP building was built by taxpayers. There was no government grants. There was no government grants, I understand, in the operations center. So there's places where we have constructed things as taxpayers which have value, and then at the same token, that is drawn strictly on the taxpayers' back, rather at this level, rather than shared between our federal and provincial. I think that's something for this council as we go forward, that we continuously address our funding shortfalls at that provincial and federal level, and continue to carry that message forward that we cannot. We have challenges with infrastructure, and that will be carried it again last week to Regina at our mayor's meeting, and had a chance to meet with the government and opposition, MLAs, and discuss the very needs of infrastructure in every community in Saskatchewan. We're all challenged by this very same fact. Any other comments from the council? Well, thank you very much, administration, and to the finance team especially for leading the charge, bringing forward that presentation, and the work that you folks have helped facilitate throughout our departments in the city, because I think finance led the charge. You've had some great discussions with departments that you haven't had in the past, and I think that the team appreciates that from our conversations as well, just talking to individual managers and staff, that knowing where their budgets are at, how they'll have influence on that, and they'll be able to give them guidance, because I think everyone wants to strive for the best that they can do and the best that they can be for our city. But without having proper information, that's huge. So, and I will give the former council credit because they've led to this new program that we're finally going to see implemented. This was a decision made by the previous council, and I'm glad that they acted on that. There was money spent. And people often say, is it good money spent? Sometimes it takes a little while to see that. And I think the results that are going to come forward through the new Diamond software and the associated softwares will pay great dividends over the long term to all of us. So from that, I'll move on to item 6 with governance and priority matters, and I don't see anything, and at this time, nothing added. So move to item number 7, inquiries from the media.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, there's a media request for yourself and Alvers.
All right, I will look to the committee for direction for a recess. Councillor Diachuk, seconded. Councillor Buckingham. No discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.